There are moments in life when it feels like the ground beneath us is shaking, as if everything we once held as certain is crumbling. It may seem as though God has let go of our hand, as if we're being punished for something we've done or failed to do. But what if I told you that's not the case? What if I told you that what you're experiencing isn't a punishment, but a divine preparation for something far greater that you can't yet see? Listen closely. What you're facing isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to shape you, to make you stronger, so that your faith doesn't rely on what you see, but on what you believe. It's to ensure that when the time comes for God to lead you to your purpose, you're ready and won't break internally, because before He uses you, God molds you. Before entrusting you with great blessings, He refines you through what hurts the most. That's a truth many don't understand. Perhaps today you're crying, confused, questioning why God allows you to go through this when you love Him, when you pray, when you do things right. But remember, even Jesus was tested in the desert before beginning His ministry. Even David was pursued before becoming king. Even Joseph was sold, imprisoned, and humiliated before reaching the palace. None of that was punishment. It was all part of the process, and so is yours. If this message touches your heart, if these words resonate with you, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who also needs a word in the midst of their process, and leave us a comment. This not only helps the message reach more people, but also tells YouTube that this content is valuable and should be shown to those who need it most. You can be part of this blessing. Your action, no matter how small it seems, can be the answer to someone else's prayer. And if you want to leave a comment right now, write this phrase: I am being prepared. Let that be your declaration of faith in the midst of the process, because you're not being punished, you're being prepared. Part 1. It's not a punishment, it's divine preparation. When you're going through a storm, it's easy for your mind to betray you, making you think that God is angry with you, that you've done something wrong, that what's happening is a form of punishment. But I want you to pause for a moment and look at everything from a different perspective. Often, what we call punishment is actually correction with love, formation, growth, a cleansing of the soul to lead us to something greater. That's exactly what God does with those He loves. The Bible says in Hebrews 12:6, because the Lord disciplines the one He loves, and He chastens everyone He accepts as His son. Here, the word discipline isn't synonymous with punishment in anger. It's synonymous with formation, molding character, removing what's useless to replace it with what's beneficial. It's like a potter with clay. He doesn't destroy the clay. He presses it, molds it, spins it, moistens it, and if necessary, breaks it to start anew. But He doesn't do it out of hatred. He does it with a purpose, to turn it into a useful and beautiful vessel. That's how God works with us. When you feel like your life is falling apart, when things don't go as expected, when doors close one after another, when pain tightens and God's response seems delayed, instead of asking, why me? Try saying, Lord, what do you want to teach me here? Because there's something in that situation working on your faith, your patience, your humility, your character. You're being formed, not abandoned. And here's the key to it all: purpose. God never allows pain that isn't connected to a purpose. Never. Everything God permits has direction. The problem is that when we're in the midst of the trial, we don't see the goal. We see the pain, the discomfort, the loneliness, the frustration, but we don't see what's being developed behind the scenes. It's like when a seed falls to the ground. From the outside, we only see dirt, but inside, silently, life is sprouting. So, when you ask why you're going through this, remember that God's purpose isn't to make you suffer, it's to make you grow. And growth hurts. Growth is uncomfortable. Growth requires letting go of the old to embrace the new. Sometimes you have to lose things, even people, so that your heart is prepared for the level that's coming. And that's not punishment, that's pruning. Jesus said in John 15:2, "Every branch that bears fruit he prunes, that it may bear more fruit." In other words, if you're being pruned, it's because there's fruit in you, and God wants you to bear even more. So don't be deceived by the sadness of the moment. No, you're not being punished, you're being formed. You're in a preparation process, not to destroy you, but to propel you, to strengthen your faith, to purify your soul, so that when the day comes for the purpose to be fulfilled, you can look back and understand why every tear, every fall, every silence from God made sense. Remember this. The greatest purposes require the deepest processes. God isn't making you wait out of whim. He's making you wait because he wants you to arrive strong, mature, with firm faith. Not as someone who was simply blessed, but as someone who was formed. And believe me, that carries eternal weight. But two, God is processing you because there's something great inside you. I don't know what you're going through right now, but I do know one thing with absolute certainty. It's not a coincidence. You're not here by accident. You're not hearing these words just because. There's something God wants to tell you, something only understood by those in the furnace, those in the cave, those being crushed, but still holding onto God's hand. And if you're one of them, then listen carefully, because this is for you. When God has a plan for you, he doesn't leave you the same. He doesn't take you directly from point A to point B without working on your character, your faith, your obedience, your ability to withstand pressure. Because the purpose isn't just to arrive, it's to remain once you get there. Many fail at that point. They ask for blessings, but don't have the heart prepared to receive them. They ask for a calling but haven't gone through the desert that empties them of pride and fills them with dependence. That's why God, in his infinite mercy, doesn't give you what you ask for yet. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he doesn't want you to lose it once you have it. Do you know one of the most common mistakes we make during trials? Comparing ourselves. We start looking at others and say, why is he doing well and I'm not? Why was that person healed and I'm still sick? Why did he get a job and I've been waiting for months? Why did she get married and I'm still alone? Why, if I pray, read the word, serve God and strive, does it seem like everything goes wrong for me? That creates a silent wound in the soul, a kind of resentment disguised as frustration that makes you think God has forgotten you. But no, he hasn't forgotten you. He's preparing you. Let me tell you something that might hurt, but will set you free if you accept it. God didn't give you the same story as others because you don't have the same destiny. God didn't form you for the ordinary. He's refining you for the extraordinary. And the higher your purpose, the deeper your preparation. It's that simple. This isn't just a nice thought. It's something we see repeatedly in the Bible. Want a clear example? Joseph. From a young age, God showed him he had a calling. He dreamed of greatness, leadership, honor. But before reaching the palace, he went through betrayal by his brothers, the pit, slavery, false accusations, prison. Years of trials, silence, pain. And it was never a punishment. It was a process. Do you know why? Because the Joseph who received the dream wasn't the same Joseph who managed Egypt. God had to refine his character, remove pride, work on his heart, teach him to forgive. All that happened. The tallest tree is the one with the deepest roots, because without strong roots, the same wind that lifts it up can also bring it down. And those roots are formed in the trial. They're formed when no one applauds you, when no one understands you, when the world moves on and you're alone in your room saying, "Lord, what about me?" But the most beautiful thing about God is that he never forgets those the world has overlooked. He sees what happens in secret. He knows every night you've cried, every time you stayed silent when you wanted to scream, every time you forgave even though no one asked, every moment you were faithful with little, quietly, invisibly. And he keeps track of all of it, because for God, nothing is small when it's done with an obedient heart. Let me share a living promise with you. Isaiah 49:15 says, "Can a woman forget her nursing child and not have compassion on the son of her womb? Surely they may forget, yet I will not forget you. And verse 16 adds, see, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. You know what that means? God doesn't just remember you, he carries you in his hands. Your name is engraved in him. Your story is etched in his heart. You're not lost, you're in process, you're being prepared, you're being reserved for a manifestation of glory. And this hidden season has a deeper purpose, to teach you to depend solely on him. Because when there's no one else to call, no one to blame, and every door closes, you begin to understand. Your real source was never people or money or position. It was always God. And when you grasp that, you become unstoppable. You no longer seek validation. You don't need human approval. You stop walking by sight and start walking by faith. That's when mature faith begins to grow. Not the kind built on quick promises, but the kind forged in fire. A faith that has cried, bled, and still stands. A faith that says, even if he slays me, yet will I hope in him. A faith that reshapes how you live, no longer to please the world, but to fulfill God's purpose. And that, my friend, is priceless. So if you feel hidden, remember, God hasn't left you. He's forming you. He hasn't silenced you. He's fine-tuning you. He hasn't forgotten you. He's preserving you. So when your moment comes, you won't show up unprepared, but with power, with conviction, with divine backing. Now listen carefully. The wound you don't understand today may be the key that unlocks closed doors tomorrow. Some pain defies logic. Betrayals, losses, unfair moments, lingering words that still hurt. And you've asked, why did God allow this? Was this really part of his plan? The answer runs deep. Yes, it was. Because what you don't understand today may be the very thing God uses to open doors no one else could. Sometimes preparation doesn't come through teaching, it comes through pain. Some lessons aren't learned in a sermon, but in brokenness. Even if God didn't cause the wound, he can redeem it. He wastes no tears, no abandonment, no betrayal. Sooner or later, it will serve a purpose. Romans 8:28 confirms it. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God. Not some things, all things, even the painful ones, even the confusing ones. Those wounds you thought were your weakness will become your authority, because no one can speak with power about something they've never lived. No one can comfort a weeping heart without first having cried. No one can lift someone else unless they've been lifted by God. That's why he allows breaking. So your voice isn't just another voice. It becomes a voice that heals, that carries weight from heaven. Look at Peter. Before he strengthened others, he denied Jesus. Yet Jesus didn't discard him. He restored him. Why? Because after his fall, Peter didn't speak from pride. He spoke from humility. He no longer thought he knew everything. He knew what it meant to fail and be forgiven. That gave him authority. Or consider Joseph. The wound he suffered when sold by his brothers wasn't erased. It was transformed. Years later, that very wound gave him the compassion to forgive and save his family from famine. Had Joseph not experienced rejection, he wouldn't have learned to manage pain. And if he couldn't handle pain, he wouldn't have been ready to handle power. Maybe you're also being trained in pain. So when your time comes, you won't be arrogant. So that when you have influence, you won't speak to hurt, but to heal. So that when you're at the top, you won't forget what it was like to be at the bottom. But that only happens with wounds that are healed in God's presence. And here's something important. Just because God uses your wound doesn't mean he wants you to live wounded. He doesn't enjoy your suffering. He's not fueled by your anguish. No. His heart aches with yours, but he knows that through your wound, he can reveal things you'd never see in calm seasons. And after that, he will heal you. And not just heal, you'll be sent with a message, because you're no longer speaking from theory, but from experience. Psalm 119:71 says, "It was good for me to be afflicted so that I might learn your statutes." Can you believe that? The psalmist says it was good to be humbled because it brought him closer to God. Sometimes it takes hitting bottom to look up. Sometimes it takes being broken to learn to kneel. It takes losing to learn to value. It takes people leaving to realize who never did. So instead of rejecting your wound, bring it to God. Say, Lord, I don't understand why this happened, but I don't want it to sink me. Use it for your glory, and you'll see. What was once a mark of pain becomes a testimony of power. Your story won't be a wall. It will be a bridge that leads others to hope, because where you were wounded, there too you'll be used. Never forget, the wound the world used to break you, God will use to build you. It may look like your story is over, but it's right there, at that exact point where everything seems to end, that God begins writing the most powerful part of your life. Because with God, human endings are just the beginning of His glory revealed. Maybe right now, you're living through one of those chapters where you feel like you have nothing left to give. Emotional exhaustion has become your daily companion. You sleep, but you don't rest. You eat, but you're not nourished inside. And what hurts the most isn't even what you lost. It's what you no longer feel within. That fire that used to drive you, that joy that used to hold you up, that faith that used to fill your soul, now all feels silent. So silent, in fact, that you wonder if God has left too. But let me remind you of something. When Jesus hung on the cross and said, "It is finished," His enemies thought He had lost. Darkness fell, the earth shook, His body was placed in a tomb, everything pointed to the end. But 3 days later, heaven spoke. The stone was rolled away. Death was defeated. What looked like the end was actually the beginning of the greatest victory ever witnessed. So if you've reached a place where everything feels like it's fading, it's only because God is preparing a rebirth. There's no resurrection without death, no victory without the cross, no glory without the process, no powerful story without a dark chapter. Why is this so important to understand? Because many give up just before the change arrives. They walk away one step before the miracle. They stop praying when the answer is about to come. They abandon faith right as heaven is preparing to open. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. To make you believe this is the end, because if you believe your story is over, you'll stop moving forward. You'll stop hoping. You'll stop believing. But I'm here to tell you with full conviction, this is not the end. This is just a chapter, and not just any chapter, but a key one that will define what comes next. What you're living through isn't here to destroy you, it's here to position you, so that when God moves, no one around you will be able to say it was luck or coincidence. They'll know it was the hand of God moving in a supernatural way. Maybe you're thinking, but I've failed so many times. I've messed up, I've drifted away, I've wasted time. But do you know what? God is an expert at taking broken stories and turning them into eternal testimonies. It doesn't matter how many times you've fallen. If you're hearing this right now, it's because your purpose is still alive. The book hasn't closed. Heaven hasn't declared it's over. So don't say it either. Look at what the prophet Isaiah says. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. You see, God isn't calling you to live in what was. He's calling you to prepare for what's coming. Even in your wilderness, He can make a way. Even in your loneliness, His presence can flow like a river. But you have to believe it, not because you see it, but because you trust the one who promised it. So today, choose to believe this is not punishment, it's a reset. This is not a loss, it's preparation. This is not the end, it's the beginning of something new. Because those who trust in the Lord, even after being broken, will rise again. And not the same as before, but with renewed strength, with clear vision, and with unshakable faith. God hasn't finished with you. And even if it doesn't feel like you're moving forward, you are. Because with God, progress isn't always seen with the eyes. It's felt in the soul. Sometimes you're growing and you don't even know it. Sometimes you're healing even though you're still crying. Sometimes you're being restored even while it still hurts. If you're still listening to these words, it's because the Spirit of God hasn't let go of your life. And if He hasn't let go of you, who can stop you? God is teaching you to depend solely on Him. There's a lesson more painful than most, but it's one of the most powerful things God teaches us in the process, learning to depend only on Him. When everything's going well, when doors are open, when people support us, when bills are paid, when health is strong, it's easy to say we trust God. But it's when all that is missing that we truly discover where our trust lies. Many of us learn to walk with God while still depending on other things, a steady job, a relationship, a group that affirmed us, even our own strength. But there comes a moment when God starts to shake those foundations, not to leave you empty, but to show you that He is enough, that when everything else fades, He remains. When no one else answers, He is still there. When you can't go on, His power is made perfect in your weakness. Paul once cried out for God to remove his pain, his thorn, but instead of removing it, God said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." That word wasn't spoken in a moment of victory, it was spoken in a moment of pain. And the lesson was this: sometimes God won't change your circumstance, but He will give you strength to walk through it. That's the key. God doesn't always calm the storm immediately, but He will teach you to walk on water. He wants to be your provider, but you won't see Him as one while you believe your paycheck sustains you. He wants to be your healer, but you won't experience that if you run to fear before faith when you're sick. He wants to be your refuge, but you won't understand what that means if you're still chasing approval from people. And those lessons, you only learn them in lack, in loneliness, in brokenness. Israel went through it. They left Egypt with promises, miracles, and divine direction. But in the desert, they panicked, because the desert strips away the comforts. No water everywhere, no abundant food, no luxury. And in that place, God revealed Himself. He gave them manna, water from a rock, guidance through a cloud by day and fire by night. In the desert, they learned that God was everything they needed, and He wants to do the same for you. Maybe you don't have all the answers, but you have the God who does. Maybe you don't have human companionship, but you have a Father who never sleeps or abandons. Maybe you don't have what used to give you security, but now you have a firmer anchor, the presence of God. And that presence, you can't buy it, trade it, or replace it. Here's something you need to understand. God doesn't compete with your idols. He can't reveal Himself as your everything if your heart is filled with something else. And sometimes what you lost wasn't a curse. It was an obstacle. It was taking a place that only belongs to Him. That's why He removed it, not to punish you, but to protect you. Because He didn't want you to build your life on something that would eventually collapse. He wants your foundation to be solid, and that foundation is Christ. And do you know what happens when you learn to depend solely on God? You become unshakable, because you're no longer tied to what's happening around you. Your peace doesn't depend on circumstances. Your joy doesn't depend on people. Your faith doesn't depend on outcomes. Your soul is anchored in something eternal, and that is true freedom. Because when your hope is in God, nothing and no one can steal what matters most. Psalm 73:25 says it beautifully, "Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you." That level of surrender doesn't happen overnight. It is shaped, cultivated, and usually learned through tears. But when you reach it, you realize that what once terrified you no longer shakes you, because you found a peace that doesn't depend on the world. You've met a God who holds you steady, even when everything else is trembling. That's what He wants for you. So if you feel alone, like you've lost everything and everyone, you're in the perfect place for a deep revelation. Because when everything falls apart, the only thing left standing is God. And that's when you discover He was all you ever truly needed. Your pain has a purpose, and your purpose is eternally significant. Let's be real. There are wounds that don't just hurt, they rip you apart. There are seasons that don't just shake you, they strip you down. And there are days where you simply feel like you can't go on. But hear this truth. Your pain has purpose. You are not suffering in vain. Your tears are not pointless. Every tear, every fall, every sleepless night, every moment of silence from God, it's all sowing something in the heavens that will bear fruit on earth in its time. If you believe you were created with a purpose, then you must understand that nothing in your life is random. It's all being guided with intention. Suffering isn't the goal, it's part of the journey. Pain isn't your identity. It's a tool God uses to refine you. What He's doing in you isn't temporary, it's eternal. He's not forming you just to make you happy for a moment. He's forming you to impact generations, to be a light in someone else's darkness, to be living proof that God is still working in this world. Here's what many don't understand. When God gives you a purpose, He also gives you a furnace. Gold doesn't shine naturally, it's refined by fire. And you are not just any metal, you are gold. That's why you feel the pressure. That's why the process is longer than you expected, because what God placed in you isn't fragile, it's strong. And strength takes time to build. Romans 5:3-5 says, "We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not disappoint." God is building in you a chain of character. He doesn't want to use you one day and see you fall the next. He wants what comes on your life to be held up by a mature, resilient, faith-filled heart. And for that, He works with you in the secret place, in the depths, in the unseen. This is where many fall, because they want the promise without the process, the blessing without the breaking. But the truth is, no one who was powerfully used by God escaped being deeply broken first. You want strong purpose? Then prepare for intense shaping. But don't fear it. The potter never breaks just to destroy. He breaks to rebuild, to create something stronger, straighter, more beautiful. You are in His hands. And think about this. How many times have you felt forgotten by God? How many times did you think your prayers weren't being heard? But if you look back with honesty, you'll also see that in moments you thought you wouldn't survive, you did. When you thought you'd sink, you kept walking. When you broke but didn't give up, that wasn't a coincidence. That was God, holding you even when you couldn't feel Him, protecting you even when you didn't understand. Why? Because He's not finished with you. What He planted in you before you were born is still alive. His purpose doesn't get erased by pain. Often, it's the pain that activates it, awakens it, brings it to fulfillment. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a future and a hope." That promise wasn't given in a moment of joy. It came during exile, when the people thought everything was lost. But God said, "I know. You might not understand anything, but I do. You think this is the end, but I've already written the final page, and it ends in peace." And that applies to you. Your emotions don't define the story. Your circumstances don't have the last word. God does, and His word over your life is still life, purpose, direction, and hope. So rise, not because it doesn't hurt, but because inside the pain, something sacred is about to be born. Let me tell you this. One day, people will be set free because of your story. Chains will break when you speak. Hearts will heal when you share what you've lived. That's why the enemy wants you to quit, because he knows if you make it through, you'll be a threat. Your voice will carry authority because you lived it, resisted it, and God was with you, and you didn't give up. God is shaping you so that when you rise, nothing can bring you down. When someone has been processed by God, they no longer walk the same. They don't react the same. They're not moved by emotion, but by conviction, because they know what it means to be broken, to be hidden, to be stripped of everything until all that remains is God. And right there, He begins to raise a new version of you. Not perfect, but stronger. A version that doesn't need circumstances to be at peace. One that doesn't collapse at criticism or inflate with praise. One that's met God in the dark and now shines in the light with real authority. God doesn't just want to pull you out of pain. He wants to resurrect something inside of you. Because it's not just about leaving the valley. It's about leaving with something you didn't have before. Discernment, maturity, depth, compassion, power. People forged in fire carry a mark you can't fake. That's not earned through books. It's earned through the process. Crying in silence, worshiping with a broken heart, believing with trembling faith. Here's a key point. When God raises you, He does it for more than survival. He raises you to be a restorer, so your hands heal where others were wounded, so your words lift where others fell, so your testimony becomes a sword that cuts through where others are trapped. That means your process wasn't just about you. It was so you could become the answer. So when someone comes to you saying, I can't do this anymore, you can look them in the eye and say, I've been there, but God lifted me. And if He did it for me, He'll do it for you. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says, Blessed be the God of all comfort, who comforts us in our troubles, so that we may comfort others with the same comfort we ourselves have received. That's powerful because it shows God doesn't just heal you to restore you. He heals you to make you a healer. It's not just about your personal healing. It's about the impact your life will have once God raises you. That impact is what the enemy fears. That's why the battle's been so intense. The losses, the falls, the doubts, the silence. Because if the enemy can make you quit, he silences the voice meant to bring healing. But if you endure, if you rise, then the process turns into power, into fire, into mission. You no longer walk as someone wounded. You walk as someone sent. And here's something even deeper. When God raises you from pain, He gives you an authority you no longer need to prove. Your presence speaks. Your lifestyle speaks. Your prayers, your service, they carry weight. Because it's no longer theory, it's lived experience. You no longer speak of a God you've read about, but of a God you've met in the valley, in the night, in the struggle. And that's when you realize it wasn't loss, it was investment. Every tear was a seed, every trial was preparation, every closed door was protection, every betrayal was redirection. Because now you know. If you hadn't walked through it all, you wouldn't be where you are spiritually. You wouldn't see what you now see. You wouldn't burn with the fire you now carry. And hear this, what God has for you is not fragile. It's eternal, not fleeting. It's transcendent. That's why the process was intense, because what's coming is weighty. What's coming on your life carries purpose, responsibility, and power. That's why God had to take you deep, so when you stand, nothing can knock you down again. Psalm 92:12 says, The righteous will flourish like the palm tree. They will grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Do you know what they have in common? Deep roots. They can be hit by storms, but they don't fall. They can bend in the wind, but they don't break. That's how God wants you. Strong, resilient, unshakable, rooted in Him. And that can only be formed through the process. So if you're rising, rise with strength. Not like someone barely surviving, but like someone who's been shaped by God Himself. Because this time, you're not walking alone. You walk marked, backed, and with divine authority.